Okay, we're here. So do we run this circuit or do you? We do? Okay. And, I'll do this February 5th, 9 a.m. Do you have any public comments? Is this broadcast on? It's being recorded. So this is like, this is strange, it's how it's up to- we are doing the agenda item 2 is safe parking. That's not.
Absolutely. I'm happy to. How am I doing on this? Are we all right? Got to get up on this one. All right. Okay. Before the CGA this morning is Agenda Bill 25-18 for safe parking. Safe parking has been a matter under discussion between the council and the planning commission for now just over a year. As is laid out in the agenda bill and in the attached staff report, the safe parking was first introduced in concept to council via interest expressed by what is the now defunct Recovery Cafe, hoping to be able to exercise a portion of their parking lot for the use of safe parking. Safe parking is an opportunity for those who are unhoused to be able to reside in their vehicle and to reside in their vehicle at a designated parking area where they are more secure or safe from potential interactions with the police for loitering or for any sort of disruptions from anybody else in the general public or other users of the area. So it provides a safe area for people to be able to park who are living in their cars. This is an interest expressed by the Recovery Cafe, and which I said is now defunct. There were some pragmatic, considerations made by staff for the feasibility of using their site in particular for the parking, in that they have no off-street parking. And there are still provisions in our code that require the primary uses of a site and their requisite parking be provided for that use. And so, potentially using those stalls for safe parking was troublesome. But more holistically than just thinking about the Recovery Cafe, staff reasoned that there was a need to be able to look at revising the code to be able to provide for the opportunity for safe parking to establish at other sites, as it may be the desire by other property owners in the city. And so the staff worked for nearly a year with the Planning Commission to be able to explore their questions and their concerns, and chiefly to learn from other established safe parking sites. You'll see in your packet for this agenda item, Exhibit E is a transcript or a summary of some conversations that staff had with existing safe parking sites that have been established for a minimum of 5 years. This was a request that was made to staff by the Planning Commission to collect on lessons learned from practiced or from practitioners in this land use, particularly as it would be helpful to be able to kind of quell some concerns or answer some questions that were expressed in deliberations of the Planning Commission. You'll see on Exhibit E that we did some research to be able to explore what safe parking sites within a general proximity to Ording have been established for at least 5 years, and we queried some questions towards those organizations. That's captured in Exhibit E. You'll see that there are questions and then responses that are prepared in blue. These are responses that staff received via email from these organizations. And these organizations were generous enough with their time to agree to about a half-hour long phone call with staff, following up on their email to ask a little bit more depth into their questions. The notes taken from those conversations are the text that is in red. So we got responses from the Lake Washington United Methodist Church in Kirkland and the Overlake Christian Church in Redmond that both gave a lot of good information and context as to the practicality of administering a safe parking program. And what those facilities described was, largely that they certainly have their challenges, but that there's also a social stigma associated with safe parking sites and the expectations of kind of results of those sites being established that were largely corrected by the establishment of these safe parking sites. That neighbors that had concerns around safety were able to see that these sites don't necessarily yield that kind of result. That's conveyed in Exhibit E. With this information having been provided generously from these churches, and having reviewed RCW 31.21.915, that's Exhibit F in your packet, staff continued to work with the Planning Commission to be able to recognize that there were a few key things involved here. One is that religious organizations or churches are protected by federal law to be able to exercise the mission of their church, and that at these church sites, the churches convey that they are exercising their federal right to freedom of their religion by being able to host these sites, and that isn't something that the city of Ording has an appetite to be able to take away from the churches. The churches also were able to convey or relay to the Planning Commission that they certainly have, no interest in operating any kind of function at their facility that would cause any sort of a feeling of discomfort or danger or destruction of property to their congregation or to their facility. And so it reasoned to the Planning Commission that both via their protected right from the federal law, from the establishment of this RCW statute in Exhibit F, and reasoning their own interest in being able to keep their own property safe, that the churches have exemplified that they are able, within their own right, to manage and administer a safe parking program without much influence or involvement from the city. There's no need for a permit to be issued. We're talking about parking lots being able to be used for the purpose of parking. And so, with these facts in mind, the Planning Commission chose to move forward with a recommendation to City Council that safe parking sites be allowed when they are accessory to an established church or religious organization within the city. I want to make one, one correction to the ordinance that I recently caught. This is my oversight. It is in reference to section 1333 uses. This is page 5 of the ordinance, which is Exhibit D in your packet. I should have represented that safe parking is permitted when accessory to permitted churches in Table 2 of this code. Table 2 governs accessory uses and their permissibility in the city of Ording, and I added it to Table 1. So it would be my ask that if the CGA wishes to move this item forward to the study session on February 19th, that it do so with that correction, that I will ensure that at that meeting, the ordinance is amended to include safe parking as a part of Table 2 for accessory uses. And that concludes my presentation. I'm glad to take any questions. Correct. Because there isn't any statute requiring that any other organization be able to establish these sorts of uses, and the Planning Commission doesn't have an appetite to see safe parking become prolific in the city. We certainly have not seen any requests come in from any of the churches in town to be able to do this. That's correct. There was some conversation when Recovery Cafe was still there that the is it the Methodist church across the street? That the Methodist church across the street could be involved in that. And we've seen that in these examples in our transactions with the other churches that are carrying out these safe parking sites. They often work in partnership with other social organizations to be able to provide those sorts of services. That the hope of the safe parking sites at the church's hope is to be able to transition these people from being unhoused to having a housing solution. And so, in each of the instances that we've spoken with in this effort, they've conveyed a partnership with some sort of nonprofit or other social organization to try to be able to make those connections. There have been some lessons learned that have been conveyed from the churches. You'll see in Exhibit E that one of the lessons learned from both organizations was that they decided to start putting a 1 year limitation on the people that they authorized to come in. And that was because in the experience of one of the churches, they estimated about 10 to 20% of people that would stay at the church in their vehicles didn't really have much of an appetite or interest in changing their dynamic. They were comfortable being able to live in their vehicle. They were more interested in being able to see cost of living be lower for them than changing their circumstance. He said 10 to 20.
I know the federal law says you don't have stop. So they set their own rules, or could we put these regulations that we don't have X, Y, Z cars won't be here for 6 to 8 months?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. So part of the ordinance requires that the church enter into a memorandum of understanding with the city, and there are required components of the memorandum of understanding that are included in if you look at Exhibit D in your for this agenda item. The memorandum of understanding is set forth on page 7, and it details that these components are required. The MOU has to stipulate that a contact or representative of safe parking shall be available at all times to the users of the site. That restroom access and running water has to be provided by the site's host. That public officials and emergency responders have to have unfettered access to the site. Illicit discharges to the stormwater system are prohibited. That they're required to maintain a spill cleanup site. That sites shall maintain their site free of garbage other than what's allowed in on-site refuse receptacles. And that safe parking site shall not occupy those off-street parking stalls needed for the church to maintain compliance with our parking code. So the churches are able to use, if they have a parking that is in excess of what is required for their site's use, they can use that number of stalls for safe parking sites. That's the degree with which this ordinance has written in any sort of limitation on the number of stalls that can be used. Right. That's exactly. So, just as an example, if one of the churches in town is required by code to have 50 parking stalls to be able to serve the number of seats that they have in their church, and they have 60 parking stalls in their parking lot, then they can use 10 stalls for safe parking, but no more than that.
First of all, thank you. It's here. No board. Sure you've done a lot. So I agree with everything colleague to the right said. So some thoughts. Before this goes to study session, I think we should flesh it out some more. I would like, it seems to me that the appetite of the city council before, and thanks also for the hard work that planning commission has done. They've gone into the weeds.
Yes, I do have a couple of thoughts so far. One is that, and I'll speak quite frankly, the Planning Commission received the council's direction that this should include nonprofit organizations as well, and put forward the recommendation specifically not to include that. I think that if I'm asked to take this back to Planning Commission, you're not going to get anything different coming back out of that board again. I think that the best way to be able to amend this ordinance to be able to reflect anything other than what you see is for council to deliberate it and to deliberate it with staff through study sessions and regular sessions. And I'm happy to do that. But I don't think that I think that taking this back to planning commission to yield a different ordinance would be futile. Okay.
Your thoughts?
Um, no, I think that we can work through your more specific ideas through the study session if you choose to agree with
Yeah,
your colleague and move it forward.
so now and then talk about it. And my preference is have beef presentation up first, add in what we want to add back as far as ML go, for security, case management required, things, and then present it to the session. We can. Those two different approaches. So, well, I'm a flexible kind of guy. So we'll just go with colleagues, and we'll take it to study session, and I will present some of my ideas likewise. Talk it.
Thank you. Understood. Thank you. Okay, in front of the CGA right now is Agenda Bill 25-10. This is a request by staff for the council to assign Planning Commission to work through amendments to Ording Municipal Code Title 11, which is our critical areas ordinance. This is a requirement by state law. Critical areas ordinance is a component of the comprehensive plan update, which we completed in December of 2024. The comprehensive plan, Commerce allows for the comprehensive plan, this component of the comprehensive plan, to be something that is completed within the year following the adoption of the comprehensive plan, without creating without creating the city to be out of compliance or ineligible for grants or loans. And so, effectively, what we have in front of us is that in 2024, the city took the opportunity to delay updating the critical areas ordinance to focus more of its time on editing the development regulations in our municipal code and the holistic comprehensive plan, and then take the following year to be able to update the critical areas ordinance. This agenda bill simply asks for the Community and Government Affairs Committee to authorize the Planning Commission to initiate that work with staff, as is required via Chapter 15 of Title 13, or of Title 15, sorry, Title 15, Chapter 12 of our municipal code for OMC updates. the effort here would be for the critical areas ordinance to be completed by September. It needs to be completed within 2025, otherwise the city becomes ineligible for any grants or loans or other financial sureties or support from the Department of Commerce. We do make use of that in the city, and so our approach is to certainly have it done in 2025, but our aim is to have this body of work completed by September as we approach a bit more of an expected dense council schedule in the fourth quarter of 2025.
Very insightful. Okay.
Thank you.
Next item, agenda EC, updates.
Thank you. In front of you right now is Agenda Bill 25-20. This is much the same, although it's not driven by any statute. This is a voluntary approach by staff to be able to update 6 of the titles in the Ording Municipal Code that are typically governed or exercised or administered by the community development department. That's the planning division, the building division, and the code enforcement division. We have had a routine practice of tracking in our work sections of the code that we're expected to administer that we have challenge with, either because the code is ambiguous or because the code conflicts in multiple areas or because best practice has taught us that there are alternative and better ways to be able to carry out the expectations of our codes. And so my department is seeking to update the municipal code this year, particularly titles 1 and titles 10, 12, 13, 14, and 15. Titles 12, 13, and 15 were recently updated as an element of the comprehensive plan update. But that body of work as authorized by council was limited to the work that needed to be done to administer or to implement the revised comprehensive plan. What we're talking about is a more holistic approach where there really aren't limitations to what it is that we can update. We're just updating anything that we're responsible on a daily basis for administering to be able to remove those ambiguities, create clarity in our code, create cohesion in our code, create ease of readability to property owners and applicants and citizens of our community, and create a more defensible code. That is what is requested. This item is intended to be worked over with the Planning Commission. And so the request today is for CGA to authorize staff to engage in this work with the Planning Commission, ultimately also intending to bring this back to council for adoption no later than September to keep that fourth quarter more available for the other anticipated items at the end of the year. No, it should just be authorized to go for staff to be able to deliberate with Planning Commission. Yep. Yep.
UD AB 25-19, PBS engineering.
Okay. Let me just get this pulled up. Okay, thank you. In front of the CGA now is Agenda Bill 25-19. It's a PBS contract authorization request for City Hall site closure. I'll give a little bit of background as to what this as to this request, and then we'll move forward from there. If it's unknown at this point, I'll share that the existing City Hall is a fairly new structure and was developed over what was discovered to be contaminants of concern. And that those were related to petroleum contaminations discovered in the soil during remediation and construction of the site. The city has for years now been engaged in remediating any of the found contamination and has done so, and is interested in being able to close out the site from being a listed remediated site with the Department of Ecology and with Tacoma Pierce County Health Department. Right now, the city is required to maintain a UST permit. That's an underground storage tank permit from TPCHD, and that costs us a growing amount of money each year. It began at about $1,400 in 2020, and our most recent permit in 2024 was $2,170. So we've seen about a 51% increase in the cost of the permit over the last 4 or 5 years. Um, the reason that we have to maintain the permit is because we haven't been able to achieve site closure for the environmental contaminants of concern beneath City Hall. A tremendous effort has already been enacted to be able to remediate the site. There was contaminated soil that was discovered, and that contaminated soil, as a component of the remediation plan that was prepared by PBS, that was at the time under contract with the city, was to be able to excavate and remove the soil and dispose of it at an approved LRI landfill facility. And that effort was done. About 432 tons of soil was excavated and taken off site. And then some samples were taken of the soil after the excavated material was removed. And there were still some remnant remediation that was left in the soil that was infeasible to be removed because it was under the sidewalk and under other surfaces, or was intended to be under the newly developed structure. That in remediation practices and environmental cleanup is typically referred to as a slab as the form of remediation. The idea being that there isn't going to be any risk of human contact with the contaminated soils because there's a slab of sidewalk or building on top of it. And so with the removal of the excavated material and with the slab over any remnant soil contamination, the site was considered largely to be removed of any sort of remediated or any sort of remnant concern from contamination. The one additional thing that PBS did to be able to absolve concern over the potential for vapor intrusion into City Hall was to install what's called a VMS, a vapor monitoring system. And I should have said at the beginning, I'm not a scientist. So thanks. I'm not a scientist, but here's the science behind all of this. The idea is that vapors from contaminated materials that are trapped or remnant within the soils that are beneath the slab have the ability to intrude into the air that we breathe in City Hall, if not for the installation of the VMS. The VMS is designed to be able to collect and transfer all of that potential vapor intrusion to outside of the building. And so we do have a VMS installed. The concern that was expressed when PBS attempted to have our site closed as being a listed contaminated site with ecology and TPCHD was that TPCHD noted that the VMS system that we have installed has never been tested. We've never had PBS come back out and actually test the effectiveness of the system. And so TPCHD is not willing to close our site from being a listed contaminated site until we conduct that kind of work. And so the contract that is being requested for council approval today, or to be moved, I think, to a study session for council consideration and approval, would authorize us to be able to hire PBS to do that work. PBS has estimated that work with a 20% contingency would cost $19,530, which we're recommending be utilized at a fund balance. The benefits of the effort here is, of course, the relief of any sort of concern about intrusion of contaminated vapors into City Hall. But more to the point, it would allow us to stop paying every year for the UST permit from TPCHD. Staff reasons that if we had to, if we weren't able to collect on, get any money back for these costs, that it would take about 6 years before the effort pays for itself by not having to continue to pay for the UST permit dues. But it's also noteworthy that For this exact matter, the contaminants of concern are remnant from past owners of the site, and the city has exercised its legal arm to be able to an attorney to be able to recover the costs that we've had to pay to remediate the issue. And so we intend to do that with this body of work as well. So far, we have a history of collecting about 50% from the past bad actors that have left the remediation here. And so, that reasons that it would be more like about 3 or 4 years before we're able to cost recover for these. So with that, my request is that we move this item forward for authorization by City Council at the study session on the 19th. Right. Breathe easy. Just kidding. Just kidding. Thank you. I think that that is the case. Yeah, I think that that's the case. Yeah, that this has been an effort since 2018. It was during the construction that the soil was tested, and it was discovered to be contaminated with petroleum. It's called PCS, petroleum contaminated soils.
What does, words says says closure. So you're talking about closing the whole building?
No, 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 no. It just closes our site from being listed as a site for remediation with the state and the county. It's the only thing. It's the only method for allowing us not to need to continue to get the UST permit.
Study session.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I should have to repeat all that again.
I'll refine it a smidge, but thank you. Uh, Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know a thing about the site. It's certainly the city's purview to be able to use its land for affordable housing or whatever other purpose it deems fit. But I don't know a thing about this property. So how whether it's feasible or even desired or easy to use, I can't really speak to it.
Sometimes off the beaten path, first for six months.
Well, and I want to be fair here. This Kim hasn't been privy to those conversations, and so we're talking about affordable housing and methods that the city can be creative with its either money or land to be able to kind of carry that effort forward. And so if we're talking about affordable, not safe parking, if we're talking about affordable housing using our land as a mechanism for an award to a potential developer to put affordable housing out there, then certainly if there truly are no services or utilities connected to it, then I think that it'd be more of a low cost offer and maybe less of an incentive for a developer to come along with the cost of needing to be able to connect it to services. This is all information I'm gathering in the last 3 minutes, so I don't I don't know. Maybe it's totally connected to utilities and services and it would be okay, but from a developer's perspective, I imagine they would say something to the effect of, you want us to build something that's affordable, but you also want us to clear the land and build a road and connect utilities out to the stubs, and that gets expensive fast. Your earlier action for me to work on that with Plan Commission basically sees that through. So thank you.